Okay. Good morning or afternoon or evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this one-to-one recorded between myself and the Chief Constable. And just so you know, this is a regular meeting that we are holding, and the aim of it is to take some of your questions and also some of my questions and put this to the Chief Constable so that he's able to get answers to you as part of the accountability process of the chief constable by the police and crime commissioner that is elected. Now, there are some discussions that we've had that obviously for different reasons we won't be able to go into detail or put in the public domain. I'm sure you will all appreciate that, but hopefully there will be enough in these conversations for you to be able to take away and get an insight into what is happening with your force here in Bedfordshire. So my name is Festus Akimuso, and I am the Police and Crime Commissioner for Bedfordshire. And Trevor, maybe you want to introduce yourself for those who don't know who you are, which of course they should know who you are anyway.
Hi, everybody. Trevor Rodenhurst, the Chief Constable here in Bedfordshire. Welcome to all of those who've taken the time to join and watch this in due course.
Brilliant. So the very first question that I want to ask you is, now I have seen quite a lot of reports on social media from the force around some of the enforcement action and also convictions that have been secured recently on some pretty ghastly crimes actually, Trevor. Now, for some people, they could be quite worried and concerned that, are we being overwhelmed by, kidnappings and murders and stabbings and shootings and things like that. But from my side, I'm also mindful of the demand that this could be placing on the force. So could you just give us an overview of where things are in terms of those kind of serious level criminality in Bedfordshire and some of the responses that you've got in place to tackle these?
Yeah, so I guess what we are doing, Commissioner, is we're making a conscious effort to use some of our social media channels to inform the public of what are actually impressive results in terms of Bedfordshire Police's response to some really serious criminality. Some of that, which I'd categorise as serious and organised crime, other as gang-related activity, and that isn't to concern the public. It's actually to explain that we do have these challenges, but actually we prioritise our response to that, and actually to also use it as a deterrent in terms of the focus is on those crime types and some of the results we've had. And for anyone who would like to see a bit more detail on that, then go on to our Instagram account or our Facebook account, where we posted some of those results recently. But just to summarize, so one particular case that we posted, I think only this week, was a particularly serious investigation into organized crime that involved fatal and serious stabbings, kidnap, torture and firearms offences. And we had 9 different offenders there sentenced to a total of 80 years imprisonment, which was delivered by a combination of force resources and our major crime resources that are part of a collaborated function but give us a great service. And there's other ones on there which highlights the threat we've seen from those who are involved in the organized supply of cannabis, from what are essentially houses and other premises that get used to effectively as cannabis factories. And that is again a focus and a priority of the force, because that's serious criminality occurring in our streets, where our residents reside, and they rightly would expect us to be focusing on that. So again, some quite visual sort of content which isn't intended to concern people, but it's intended to sort of show the reality of the work of our officers in tackling that threat. I guess what we should mention, Commissioner, if I may, is we have made the case that Bedfordshire needs specialist capability to tackle this, and therefore we have 2 special grants in place. One, Operation Costello, that helps us tackle the threat from organised crime, and also Operation Bosun, which is our response to guns and gangs. So that's additional funding the force gets to tackle those threats, and we make really good use of that funding, and those teams deliver really impressive work, actually.
Okay. Just briefly on that particular demand that your officers are facing at the moment, Trevor. I'm interested to know how much of these activities are put in the public domain for the public to see, and is there anything that could be done to make the public more aware of the, obviously when the case is concluded or things that obviously you don't want to compromise an investigation, is there any more that can be done to make the public more aware of what your officers are doing, the outcomes they're achieving? Because I think for some of our residents, if they don't see those kind of enforcement outcomes, nothing is happening.
Yeah, and it is a balance, Festus, because the serious nature of the criminality, you want to investigate it. Sometimes
Yeah,
we want to deploy covert tactics, which it would be counterproductive to be advertised. But all I would
yeah,
say is, you know, we are going after those individuals that cause the most harm. We are going after them, and there's no crime type in that kind of serious and organised crime
right,
space which is not going to be policed by Bedfordshire Police, and that includes drug dealers and those that choose to exploit others. So the public will see more of this going out on our social media channels, because much of the questions that I get, and I know you certainly get, evolve around sort of more community-based policing issues, and it's important that the public understand, whilst there's 10% of our resources focused in that area of policing, which is really important, and
yeah,
actually community and policing is part of that answer. We have to have a number of other capabilities to
yeah.
look after victims, and also go after those proactively that would otherwise create real harm to communities.
And I think if I would just take this opportunity as well, and I'm sure you probably would join me as well, Trevor, because a number of these reports, they have relied on members of the public who are calling in to report something of concern, which then is then led to your officers being able to take action. So I want to just thank the members of the public who do call in, despite their own concerns, perhaps for their own safety, to report something because something is not quite right, and has led some of these outcomes for Bedfordshire Police and for our communities as well.
Yeah, and that it's important that people report stuff, because even if they don't see an immediate response, the fact that we know about it, and then we get other things reported, and when you add those, you pull the whole picture together, it gives you a way of prioritizing threats. So it is important. Where we can, it's nice to feed things back, but often with intelligence, just because of the volume and sometimes the time that it takes to build up the right picture. And as you say, we have to prioritize resources, but all of that is logged, and all of it contributes to our overall policing response to prioritize the use of our resources in a way that does our very best to keep the public safe.
So you're saying that um, intelligence that's reported in by members of the public, they're not just ignored and just deleted and put away somewhere.
No, and we will assess the full totality of the
Right.
picture. We will go
Okay.
back some considerable time
Okay.
to do that.
So that means that you have a system in place for determining which one is a priority, which one can be logged, and then create a picture for other investigations. So you've got a system in place for actually being able to determine that.
Yes, and some of it will aggregate to a position where we put a proactive operation in place, and then other times we'll be making local community and patrol officers aware
Right.
of a emerging problem that we want vigilance around.
Excellent. And that leads me to another question. This one's come from a member of the public, and I, I won't read all of it, but I'll get to the question of it. It says, "Hello, I would like to know why Biggleswade, Potton, Sandy, and Shefford have to share a single police community support officer representing 1.8% of Bedfordshire's 53 PCSOs, when their combined population represents 8.2% of Bedfordshire's population, suggesting that they should have 4 to 5 PCSOs. Sandy in particular has been plagued by ASB, vandalism, drugs, fly tipping, etc. in recent years, with a sharp increase recently that I'm sure you're aware of. And basically, they want to know why there is such a low number of PCSOs, particularly in Sandy, um, and I suppose when in fact the population size of Sandy accounts for X amount.
Yeah. So I'm pretty familiar with that sort of part of the county, Festus, and what I would say to the person asking that question is you don't have a single PCSO, you have a service of a community team, and that team that operate from Biggleswade have an establishment of 8 police constables and 7 PCSOs, and that team work together in the service in that area in a way that kind of looks at making the best use of those resources. Now, even when I look at that team in terms of its abstractions, we've got all 7 of the PCSOs in post, and we're carrying 2 gaps in the policing side. So it's still,
So there are five. So there's 5 or 6 PCs.
no, there's 6. Yes, so there's 6 PCs and 7
Okay.
PCSOs on that side
Okay.
of the county. And you and I, Commissioner, have spoke about our desire to, you know, in, put some of our uplifted resources in due course into community policing. And Central Bedfordshire is part of the county where we will probably look to do that in due course, because in Luton and in Bedford, our student hubs operate there, and you automatically get a significant uplift of local resources operating in those places. So this is a good way to kind of look at that. But that's not going to happen now. What I would say is, in terms of that residents' concerns, there we've noticed a slight uplift in ASB type offences in Sandy. I don't resonate with the sharp uptick, but that could
Mm.
be a difference between what we're told and what we know.
Right.
So that goes back to our conversation about why it's important to report. However, to reassure that individual, the local inspector, who was Grant Maxted, is aware of an uplift on there, because I was made aware only the other day that there is a month-long focused operation that's commencing in that area to look at antisocial behaviour and related criminality, that's being led by his community policing team. So they're working together to tackle those issues in Sandy.
Okay. But so I guess we would want to make sure then that the residents are aware of those targeted operations,
Yeah.
which are those, do you know if those are public? If they're not public, might you consider asking Grant if he can let the public know through their, social media handles what is happening and when?
Yeah, well, it's public now, isn't it? Because I just told everyone. So the yeah, well, I mean, what we
Okay.
will nudge is that it's important when community teams are doing sort of any intensification that this is done, with residents, with partners,
Okay.
to address these issues, and I'm sure there will be, but I will encourage that to happen.
And then I also will ask about this before I ask you another question that kind of links to this first one from a resident is, when you are deciding how to deploy your officers and your resources, which I am not responsible for, that is entirely your prerogative as chief constable. Do you base that on population size, or do you base that on risk level based on data that you have?
Yeah,
Or is it a
there is.
combination of both?
It's a combination, but the risk bit is a really important factor,
Okay.
because when someone rings 999 and they need, an immediate response, we need to have the assets in the right place to provide that response. And we know where we get, higher volumes of demand. When we look at our threat assessment in relation to organized crime, when we look at our assessment in terms of gangs and other forms of exploitation, again, we need specialist teams to do those. And again, a lot of harm happens not in the street but behind closed doors. So there's that part about being safe in your home. And again, what sadly one crime type that we do see have a high prevalence of is crimes such as domestic abuse and related crimes, and therefore when people are in those situations, they need to know that Bedfordshire Police have the right teams in place to be able to respond to that crime. So it's working as a system, and it's
Right.
configuring our resources in the right places. And I think it's easy to focus on community policing as what your kind of share of policing looks like. But if you think about even the visible resources that are out there, they are combined with patrol officers, with roads
Yeah.
policing officers, with
Yeah.
armed policing officers. This is a system response,
Yeah.
and detectives that are available to investigate crimes in those
So
areas.
so what you're saying is that rather than focusing on whether you've got one PCSO or five, um, a member of the public does not differentiate between a response officer driving through Sandy or a community officer driving through Sandy. All they see is a police officer, and they wouldn't care either way whether they're a community or not. Pretty
Yeah.
much. So they've got that entire number available to support if needed.
And we have other resources that are effectively, they're mobile teams that we deploy at certain problems. And if you're a PCSO or a community officer who's got a particularly challenging problem, then through our tasking process, we might give that individual access to
Right.
more
Okay.
resources to support them, to overcome that. And obviously they work really, really closely with other parts of the public sector, to deliver some of those responses effectively to problems, because often we are tackling the kind of the end result of certain situations, and sometimes by other interventions, we can kind of reduce people's kind of demand on services, across the board.
So, I mean, I think this would be actually be a good time to actually thank those partners because I have seen and I've heard reports of some excellent partnership between the three local authorities and the community policing team with some of their community safety wardens. They call them different names in different parts of the county. And it's really good to see some of the partnership work that happens between them. So it's just nice to see that the community teams are tapped into that. Now, the next question that I've had from a member of the public also is linked to the first one. You mentioned about student hubs and in Luton and in Bedford. One question from a member of the public says the PCC recently stated that we now have the highest number of police officers in Bedfordshire, and the chief constable says we have a high number of new recruits or probationers. So the question is this: are probationers qualified police officers? Are they actually doing the job of cops? I don't really like the word cops because that's very American. But anyway, that's what the person wrote. That's what I'm reading. Are they actually doing the job of cops? Where are they, and what do they do as probationers?
Yeah, it's a good question and a good opportunity to respond to that. So these days we call them student officers, but essentially they get the warranted powers pretty much in their first week of joining the organisation. But they spend um, pretty much every month we are bringing new people into the organisation, and once they enter the organisation, in general, they will spend a number of weeks in a classroom when they have to learn the very basics, and that ranges depending on what entry pathway they're in, but it's in the region of 20 weeks at the beginning of their service. But after that, they move into the student hub where they are paired up with an experienced officer who is a trained tutor, and at that point them and their tutor are deploying, um, to provide service to the public, and they're learning on the job. So they are arresting people, they are investigating crimes, and they are responding to the needs of victims. So actually, that increased presence will be felt, here and now, because
Mm.
they're in that part of the system. And some of them, whilst we have got a large number of students, are near the end of their student journey. So they're at the stage where we might not have completed their student sort of portfolio, that they have to demonstrate competence in every single aspect of the basics of policing, but they may be sufficiently along there that actually they are, you know, able to drive a
Right.
police vehicle and respond to calls for service and get sort of time where they get sort of, with supervisors just to kind of get them to the end of that journey. So we've got people who are literally, being sworn in as we speak, right through to people at the end of that journey on that spec. So there is going to be a gradual increase in resources over time. And the important part of that being a really effective kind of timeline is that we retain the people and help them to be successful, and support them throughout their journey. So we are at a moment in time where we're needing to focus some of our resources on getting these people up to speed so that they can then provide a good service to the public in due course. This is not an overnight mission. This is a long-term rebuild of our resources that were depleted over a number of years. And therefore the investment that we put into internally in due course will then allow us to create additional capability and capacity to improve the service we provide in the medium to long term.
So in effect, those new recruits and probationers, they are police officers because they've got a warrant card. So they can arrest someone if they wanted to. But if they're in their first 20 weeks, they're still pretty much in the classroom rather than being out on the streets. They're still learning, but they are police officers, but they're in the classroom. However, once they finish that 20 weeks, they then go into the student hub, where they're then out on the streets with their tutors doing different sort of stuff.
Yeah. And then the tutor decides, along with the sergeant in the student hubs, when they feel that individual's ready to go onto a patrol team. They'll still be a student, and then they'll get paired up with other officers, not necessarily a dedicated tutor, so that they can continue that progression into core policing.
So in effect, they get their shift pattern after those 20 weeks in the classroom.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I hope that answered the question from the public there who wanted to know if probationers are cops, to use his or her words. So the answer is yes, they are. Do you know how many we've got? It's probably putting you on the spot here. Do you know how many we've got in the 20 weeks roughly, and how many are just kind of coming out? I know we've got one of the highest number of student officers in the country, right, as a proportion of our workforce.
Yeah, so we haven't got the highest number of students, but we've got the highest proportion of students of our total headcount of officers. So we've got just over 400 individuals who are classed as students, but many of them are delivering core policing, and here and now as we speak. And so those that it's going to be a much smaller number that are in classrooms, and not all of it is for 20 weeks. We have a number of pathways in, those who've got a degree, those who want to go on an extended student period and get a degree, and those who come in, if you like, on what I describe as the traditional route, which is more of a 16 weeks in the classroom. And also those who are on an accelerated detective pathway. So there's a real opportunity, depending on what your ambitions are, if you consider the police service as an employer of choice, to join on different pathways. So as I say, it's a much smaller proportion of people in there. I don't know the exact number.
It's fine.
The lion's share of students are actually either in the student hubs or on patrol teams, or in some cases they're doing rotations through our crime teams, where we upskill them in being better investigators, so that they then can be more effective at investigating the kind of crimes that we ask patrol to investigate as part of
so the expectation then, if I'm right, is that as obviously we've seen this kind of an increase in recruitment over the last 3 years or so, that's going to tail off, rather than plummet, but it's going to tail off. So with that, then we will be seeing fewer officers in that 20-week period, but more and more of them being out on our streets, basically.
Yeah, we still will be recruiting regularly.
Yes, yeah, but not at that kind of rate, though.
Not at the rate we did at the end of this year, where we needed to achieve an increase. This is now a maintenance of numbers. Which nevertheless is still a needs a significant kind of system response to from ourselves to ensure we get the right, the right people with the right level of training and standards to go out there and and thrive in the organization and deliver the service we want to deliver to the public. So we work really closely with the public of Bedfordshire. I think we don't do policing to the public, we do it with the public. And I just we all want to see more people, but right now I need to enable these invest time in these individuals, get them to be effective, and then we will be able to populate some of the teams that we would wish to, in the way that they need to be as efficient and effective as they can be. And then at a point in the future, there'll be an opportunity where we may say, right, we're in that position, and we might want to, build some different capability or enhance certain services that we provide. We are a little way off from that because we are on the, this is a journey and it's not an instant transformation. It's because of it takes time to build the skills to be a really highly effective officer. But we've got some people who are doing really, really well on that, and I see some great results from people quite early in their service.
Yeah. Either way, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Rather than having to reduce numbers overall. Right. The next one I want to ask you. This one came in from a councillor who said the mayor of Bedford keeps saying that Bedfordshire has one of the worst outcomes for domestic burglaries based on a Freedom of Information request. The PCC says the mayor is using outdated and inaccurate data. Um, can the chief constable please let us know who is right and who is wrong? Can we see the most current and accurate data on burglaries in Bedfordshire? You're more than welcome to be as blunt as you need to be, but obviously I get the questions in and I get them to you, so I am not picking and choosing what I ask here. So
no, well, I mean, I'm glad that you asked that, and I'm apolitical on this, and I appreciate it is a election period and things get said. And some of that was based on national reporting of certain captures of data. I think this is important for the residents to know, though, who might have read that. We've there's different types of burglary, and what I'm going to talk about is residential burglary, so where someone's home is broken into, because I personally believe that that deserves a more prioritized response than maybe when, for example, a allotment shed's broken into. Not that I decry that, and that should be investigated. But when I look at when someone's home's been broken into, we always attend those situations and we always investigate them. If I look at our performance, and obviously we're at that time of year where I can look back at our data, some of the where we stand nationally is not verified yet because the Home Office kind of verification, the iQuanta data as it's called, runs a couple of months behind because it does it on quarters that are verified. But what I can say with confidence here now is we've firstly reduced burglary and significantly at people's homes. So there've been more than 400 fewer burglaries of people's homes this year than there was last year. And I talk 1st of April, as we do in policing, to the end of March as a kind of year. And in terms of solving crimes, we're solving around 11%, and people might say, well, that's little more than 1 in 10. Nevertheless, we're solving that rate, and that solved rate, whilst I think we sat in February as 4th highest nationally from any force in the country at 43. We had a good result, a good month in March. Now, I can't say we're going to be first, but I'm hopeful. And I think it'll be an improved position on 4th. So if you're right at the top end of the league table in terms of, solving crimes, and more importantly for me, if you are working to prevent crime, as policing should be, and you've reduced them by 400 compared to the previous year. And I think compared to COVID, which is often, pre-COVID year, which is the 1920 year, It's a 62% reduction, you know, in an overall response to burglary. So
That is pre-COVID.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that's going in the right way, and that's overall burglary. But in
yeah,
terms of, you know, so I've focused here on my answer on when people's homes are broken into, because when we talk in the news and just use the term burglary, you know, that's what I think of when, you know, people read those articles, and I think that's why it was important to share that with the public, because this isn't a bad news story for Bedfordshire Police and the residents of Bedfordshire. It's actually a good news story that
yeah.
they're living in a relatively safe part of the country with a force that's performing highly. Now, I will take any criticism where it's justified of our force, but actually our response to residential burglary is a success, and it needs to be recognised as so.
And do the Maze team or a scenes of crime officer attend every burglary, residential burglary
So,
still?
so we, the police, Bedfordshire Police, will attend every residential burglary. You might not always be a specific, you might not be a uniformed police officer, it might be a
Right.
forensic officer, it might be
Somebody.
a, you know, you might get a follow-up visit from our specialist burglary squad because that burglary is identified as being part of a series, and you might get a follow-up from a PCSO. Um, Nevertheless, we've got a dedicated team, and not all forces have that, which is part of our success. And you know, and we've been pushing the success of that team forward because it's a relatively small team. But when you have quality people focused on a specific crime type, which I'd like to do more of in due course, you know, that really yields dividends. And as I say, the results talk for themselves.
Well, thanks for clarifying that. My understanding is that the FOI or Freedom of Information request that the mayor's colleagues put in only had about 19 or thereabout responses from out of 43 police forces.
Yeah, and I can't remember the time frame it looked at, and I know it looked at all burglary, and there's lots of different, you know,
Types
offences
of
that fall
burglaries.
into that.
Right. Okay.
I've explained, you know, what our performance is like. So I'm not saying that a particular FOI and the way it was framed is inaccurate. I just giving the correct message that I think residents should understand.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. And I guess people can make of that what they want. The one thing I would just ask about burglaries, though, Trevor, I have had not a lot, but a small number of correspondence from shopkeepers. And I think there was a video that was shared with me by a counselor recently of a warehouse where literally a lorry was stolen. You could see that on CCTV, and that was taken off site. And I'm not sure if it was ever recovered. And apparently, there was no police action. While I'm very mindful of the demands on your resources and things like that, what can the public expect if it's a commercial premises, so a shop or warehouse or business premises that was burgled
Yeah,
from Bedfordshire
look,
Police?
if there's a crime happening in progress, and someone's, you know, rightly letting us know that by 999, um, I'd expect us to be responding to that with available resources to go and respond to that. Obviously, I don't know the exact location, time, what
Yeah.
else was going on, and how that was reported in terms of, you know, but if it was in the commission of the offence, I'd expect us to be responding to that. And actually, if we've given details of a vehicle that's made off and those kinds of things from the location, it may be that we're actually looking for that vehicle, you know, based on the information that was provided to us. So then obviously that sort of burglary other, it, you know, ranges from things such as sheds, outbuildings, right through to commercial business, you know, business premises. So there's a whole spectrum of, you know, different areas there, and there isn't a single size fits response, but very much there is a difference if a crime is happening here and now as to one that needs to be subsequently
Right.
recorded and explored for investigative opportunities. So, you know, on that one, if someone wants to provide me with more information, we can have it looked into. Because I don't know the specific case you are referring to.
Okay. All right. I'll look into that again, and I can forward that on to you. The next question is more from me. It's around technology and the impact that is having in the force control room. I know that you've put some investment into the force control room to help improve call response times by bringing in some technology. Can I get an update on this and on some of the challenges initially around the transcripts and the multi-chat facility on there? Any update on that, please?
Yeah, it's something I'm personally really focused on. We don't currently provide the service I'd like us to for the public from our control room, but that's not because of the staff in there who are doing an amazing job. It's because we're aiming to put more resources in there to match demand, but demand is at record levels. So something I've not shared with you in any other conversation, Commissioner, is that March was the record of 999 demand, I believe, in the force's history, or one of the busiest months, certainly. It was not far short of 14,000 999 calls.
Wow. The highest that I had heard was about close to 13,000.
Yeah, so this is broken that, and so it was, unprecedented demand on the people in that room, and nevertheless responded to. And that, but when we look at the control room as a whole, it takes demand from the public in a number of different channels. So we have the 999 calls, we have our 101, and also our kind of crime recording, which gets filtered out through that. And there's a web chat facility to talk, online. When we analyze that, not the 999 calls so much, the not what we call the non-emergency contacts, there is about a 30% demand in there, which is not for the police. It's seeking support potentially from other services, or needing signposting to other ways of getting the answer to that, and therefore that, on those volumes and that kind of percentage of demand, which is potentially not for the police, and it could be, it's for a local authority, it's for the Environment Agency, and people generally are ringing because they need information. That we're looking at technology both in terms of the web chat and voice response to non-emergency calls that can help immediately put the people where they need to go in those categories. So if I suddenly say we take out 30% of our demand, that makes up for a lot of extra people you need to answer those calls and wade through that, because even
So
if
is
it's
that what has been achieved at the moment?
so
About 30%?
at the moment, this is building up to where we are in terms of our innovation. We are one of the forces which is really, focused on technology as being part of the answer. We'll always need people, and we'll always, I think, have 999 for the foreseeable future as the chosen, method to report an emergency. However, we've got a web chat technological solution in place, which means that at the start of that conversation, you're engaging with a bot, much like you would do if you were engaging with, Amazon Web Services on there, in terms of, your experience of buying something, or if you had a query. That is because it's powerful, the technology, it can have multiple conversations at one time and be very speedy in that. And therefore, it's, in terms of the web chat, about 20% of the contact has been signposted and pushed to other places that it needs to be. And that's not kind of saying necessarily you're at a message telling you to go somewhere else. In some instances, it's saying you need a local authority for this. Click on this link, and it will open it up and take you to the right point.
Right. Okay.
So that what we're looking to do is enhance that's already in place, and then move into a voice solution,
Right.
which will do exactly what I've just described at speed in multiple scenarios, and ideally in multiple languages in due course. We're not at that point yet. We are, we're looking at what that scheme of works looks like. We're looking to sign that off in the next fortnight and get that underway. And then the third aspect is something sort of the next level on from this, which is more of a victims portal. So that's a product that again almost means that we, residents can engage with us in a different, or the public can engage with us through a different portal that's a bit more intuitive, and in due course we can provide that individual with feedback and information that we think might be relevant to them based on what we know about them and what they've agreed for us to know about them. So that is in a much earlier stage of discussions, but we are looking at a technical solution. Again, we are meeting with suppliers at the end of the month to see how that product could help us, because there is a product we believe we could use here. And that's the only pressure with this is it's the same. I need my people to be involved in it, and they're the same people that are currently responding to the public, and that's the balance that we just need to make.
Right. Okay. And kind of linked to that, obviously, in terms of the accessibility of the public to Bedfordshire Police services, I have mentioned to you about the DAMS, the Digital Asset Management System. Can I just have an update on that platform? What residents can expect once this is in place? Because obviously we agreed this, I think, in November 2021 or December 2021, and it's been a while. And I'm not the most patient person, but yeah. So what was the update on that, please?
Yeah, actually, it's a timely question. It's a positive update. So that has been a slightly bigger project. It's involved more than one force. We've collaborated around it to, have a joined up system, but also to make the kind of cost of doing that more efficient. So our digital asset management system, well, what does that really mean? It's kind of a speedier way to store, review evidential videos such as body-worn videos, CCTV, digital interviews, and there's an enhancement that it contains which enables the public to upload their own digital media such as CCTVs, Ring doorbell, dash cams, direct, and that's as simple as an officer that is investigating what their crime or what they're reporting, providing them with a link so that they can upload their data. And in the past we've had ways of doing that, but it's been hampered by things like file sizes and those kinds of things, whereas it's intended to kind of overcome these. And that's if you like, a seamless end-to-end system which could go from the public providing us with a key bit of digital media through to the material that then goes to CPS in due course as part of the case.
I mean,
and for us, that's due to start going live in the very near future. I think I haven't got the date off the top of my head, but I think we are due for go live in July, early July.
Okay.
And that is whilst it's an ICT project, it's a change project because officers have to work in different ways. They have to be aware of how to use it. And so it isn't on that date in July, it all works seamlessly. It's ready to be implemented and used from that date. So it'll be a rollout and a training program.
Right. Because I was going to ask about the training.
Yeah.
And the awareness of officers, because obviously I'd imagine at the moment people either have to use Good Sam or which all of the other platforms have a limitation in terms of the file size they can upload. Obviously, a video footage that's 2-3 minutes long, that becomes quite bulky, so there are limitations there. Or alternatively, an officer has to go to the person's property and collect the hard drive and then bring it to the station. So what you're saying is that this new system would allow people to be able to remotely upload the video footage themselves.
Yeah, in many instances, it will do that. It's a significant enhancement to what we currently have. It won't replace necessarily things like Good Sam because that has other uses. We can live stream into our control room a crime as it's happening that someone's videoing from their phone. Those kind of things. So that's an important functionality that will just complement this.
Right. Okay. Well, I look forward to July when the button is flicked on.
Yeah.
And I hope it stays on.
Well, yeah. You and I both. That is the intended date.
Okay. No, that's fine. Thanks for that update. Next question. Public confidence in Bedfordshire Police is important to both of us, and An important element of this is the force's ability to respond to crime reports. What plans are in place to accurately measure public confidence, and what does the force do with that data if it does collect them?
Yeah, so I don't think there's one answer to measuring confidence. I think it's we do surveys directly in relation to, asking the public what their service was like, and in sort of judging whether they felt that was a good service or not. Clearly there are a whole host of different things we look at to measure what we think are measures of confidence, including reports of dissatisfaction, complaints, and actually we get a lot of positive feedback. I got a letter the other day, describing an elderly gentleman's experience in dealing with a tricky, road collision, and how his experience of our officers. And he actually pointed out in the letter that he was taking the time to tell me how positive his experience was, because he often knows that we only hear when things don't go so well.
Oh,
So
tell me about
if
it.
he's
Tell me
if he's
about it.
listening, then I'm really grateful. But and that's been passed back to the officer.
That's
Um,
wonderful.
but so you've got various measures, including feedback loops we have we have one of the most comprehensive independent advisory group systems. So we get messages fed back through that. And when I spoke to you about our aspiration to have a victim portal, then when we get to that point, you'll actually have a technological way of asking pretty much everybody how they felt about their experience,
That would
which
be
is
good.
obviously the end goal. But a lot of the public who we serve actually aren't actually embrace that kind of technology, and will always want to, give us feedback in community meetings and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's one answer to that.
I
I
guess
think
for
it's
me, I guess for
yeah,
me, the main thing is that I am reassured that the force is doing everything it can to um, be informed of how the public feel about its services, whether good or bad. And it's not just a case of hearing what we want to hear, but actually, hearing what is being said, what is being experienced, because it's all about improvement, right? I mean, policing is not a perfect science, and things will go wrong sometimes, and miscalculations will be made on
yeah.
occasions. As long as we are aware of that, and efforts are being made to deal with that and to keep improving, then I'm relatively satisfied.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing we should remember is we have a very thorough inspection regime of policing, and HMIC
Yeah,
are, you know, whilst that's inspection and holding, and public accountability, I see it as free consultancy, and
yeah,
so
yeah.
we obviously have that as a measure of areas where we're performing well and areas where we need to improve the service that we provide to the public.
And on the HMI CFRS inspections, can you just let the public know how long they actually spend and how much they really dig deep into what is happening in the force?
Yeah, they generally spend a few weeks in the force doing actual, field work on site, and where they have absolute full access to our staff, our data. They come back, they do focus groups, but then they spend about a total period of 6 months collecting data, and that kind of thing, before they then, start to pull that together, and that. So it's quite a drawn out process with a significant, amount of material access, workshops, and obviously our data is our data. It's publicly available, and that
Yeah.
they get to scrutinise that, but they dip sample individual cases. That being said, we don't wait for that kind of cycle to come around. We have
Mhm.
an internal team dip sampling our own cases, routinely, and that's really important that we're doing that. We're talking about a young workforce, that's improving, and that's why that leadership of that young workforce is important, and that's combined with dip sampling, etc., so that we can really, focus on what we know we can find the answers to ourselves.
But just on the victims portal, when do you expect that to go live? Do you have a time frame in
I,
mind?
I don't have a time frame because there's a without naming companies,
Yeah, sure,
there's a
sure.
product we think that we could sort of take and work with a supplier to introduce into Bedfordshire potentially,
Okay,
and we have a meeting later this month
okay.
to look what that could look like. So it's whilst that's early, that's not a known of national ICT project, which can take a long time. This is
Yeah.
a local innovation that we want to bring in.
So is this the provider I think we've spoken about?
Yes.
Obviously, we won't name that. Yeah, if I can be a part of that meeting, and I think they've got a presentation that they're doing at some point. I'll be happy to be a part. Even though I have already seen what they do, but it'll be good. Otherwise, I can just leave it to crack on with it, and then just let me know when we've got this brand spanking new product for our residents. Okay, thanks for that. Now, another question. This is from a member of the public because they want to know what it is that community police officers are tasked with doing. What is their main role? And I think part of the reason why I wanted to put this question to you, Trevor, is because I talk about we've got a record number of officers now in Bedfordshire Police, officially the highest we've ever had. And people expect to see 1,455 police officers in uniform on their streets across all of Bedfordshire. And increasingly, I think some people need to appreciate that there's so many different functions that carry out different roles within policing, and that is necessary. In this case, about community policing. So, what is the tasking of community police officers in Bedfordshire Police at the moment?
Yeah, so the community policing team is one of the teams that has, in many ways, less tasking because we allow it to look at the problems that are occurring in the communities in terms of crime types, problem locations, problem individuals, and being able to then work to problem solve that. And
Right.
therefore, they have a good degree of autonomy, but data that's available to help them make good decisions and leadership available. And obviously, some of that is in conjunction with the community in terms of priority setting meetings. And I was quite pleased earlier. You asked me a question about antisocial behaviour in Sandy, and I was when I was aware that there was an operation, that was being planned to, or that was commencing in order to tackle that problem. So I won't go because we haven't got a lot of time left, but through
Yeah.
the core pillars of what good neighbourhood policing looks like. But it's available if you Google it on the College of Policing website. And again, we leave our officers in community policing to go out and problem solve, and we seek to abstract them as minimally as possible
Yeah.
away from that. So a lot of it will be different in different parts of the county. And initiatives such as Clear Hole Build, where you know, kind of have a tougher enforcement edge of policing, closing down problem premises, taking on, local drug dealers,
So
individual.
is that being run by local community policing
I,
in Dallow?
I see it as a method of delivering effective
Right.
community
Okay.
policing. It
Right.
isn't just delivered in the early stages by community, and it isn't delivered by policing alone. But really good community policing works
Yes.
really well with partners, really
Yes.
well with the community, and really well with the rest of the
Yes.
force.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Two more questions for you. One is from a member of the public, and one is from me. The last one, the one from the member of the public is this: can the chief constable please explain why so few crimes are solved, and what can be done to improve these?
Yeah. So in terms of that improvement, firstly, we want crimes not to happen in the first place, which is why
Yeah.
we invest in things like community policing, and diversionary activity and all of those things. Is a complex, you know, this is system response. Right now, we are, a force that's performing well in its main challenge, other than funding overall, but its main challenge is that um, some of it's, we are growing the organization and therefore have a large number of people in the early stages of their careers. And therefore, aren't ready to be posted into some of the places. Ideally, I would like to do it here and now. So
Right.
we've got an investment in those people in due course. And whilst those people are contributing to solving crimes, because the student hubs take on a workload, they investigate things, they arrest people. Ideally, when you have less people in that part of the system, you have you have your teams fully up to strength, so you have a better ability to manage workloads, to do things really thoroughly, and to deliver good outcomes for the public. And when you get to a point where those teams are really in a healthy position, you can start to invest more in your prevention and proactivity.
Okay.
And those things then really start to, have big effect.
Okay.
So we mentioned the burglary team. I'd like to have some other teams that are niche, a bit like that. And we will do in due course. So, in terms of that question, this is on a improvement, and it's going to be gradual and hopefully in the right direction. We're in the right quartile for most performance metrics that are
Okay.
currently available nationally.
Okay. And the last question is more what advice you would give to someone who is afraid of their own personal safety when it comes to reporting a crime.
Yeah, so we always take the victim's circumstances or the reporting person's circumstances into account. So there's a difference between you are able to tell us about something in the first instance, and we can work with you to then, if that becomes a proper report of a crime that you wish to pursue, and in certain crimes, against the person, then clearly we work really closely to build confidence in being able to do that. So all I would say is tell us, but tell us your concerns so that we can take
Right.
those into account from the
Okay.
outset. And we
Okay.
have specialist people for people who feel they're in particularly vulnerable circumstances, such as people who may be living with an offender, or
Right.
subject, surviving domestic abuse and those kinds of things, and other kind of coercive, controlling behavior. We've got specialist officers that can help, and ways of contacting people that doesn't threaten their safety.
Right. Okay. And I guess there's also always Crime Stoppers as well. If people don't want to go down that, they can always, and that's completely anonymous.
Yeah.
So that's an alternative as well. Well, um, Chief, thank you very much for your time, for those comprehensive answers, and for those who've sent in questions. Thank you very much as well. Hopefully, you've got answers to your questions. If not, fire them in again. We'll we'll get the chief to get a second go at it.
Yeah.
Trevor, thank you very much for your time.
No
Have a good
problem at
day.
all. No.
Bye
Okay.
bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.